Hey Explorers, welcome to another video. I hope you all had just as much fun as I did at my local set championships for Into the Inklands. If you were all able to get out to one, I had a blast. I played in 4 of them. I ended up getting first, second, third, and then I lost in top 8 of the last one. So I ended up with 1 of each playmat, 3 stitches, and then the last one I got a few packs. But it was a great week and a half. I look forward to doing this again in the next 3 months after Chapter 4, the Ursula's Return comes out. So we've got still a couple more weeks of this format, and if you are going to the challenge in Atlanta, I have a deck that I would personally be on. I'm not going to get to go to this first one, but if I were, I have been playing around with this blue-red items list. Actually, I got the list from Savis. He's a big streamer. I've actually been following him for several years back in the day when I used to play Hearthstone. But he is a great deck builder, an amazing card player. So I am very excited to share this deck with you guys. Alright, so here's the list. It's, for the most part, the core is still the same. You're still a ramp deck, you're still drawing cards with Flavor Sham and Popsicle, you're still clearing the board with Maui and a combination of Lady Tremaines and Madame Medusas and Be Prepared and the like. You still have 2 Lucky Dimes. This list is playing 3 Bells, which I'm a big fan of, just closing out the game as kind of a combo finish with Lucky Dime. But this list has a bit more ramp than the average list. You've got 4 1-jump aheads, obviously the 4 Fishbone Quills, and then also 3 How Far All Goes. I really wasn't a fan of that card in the beginning, but now just kind of how the way this particular list is running, I really like it in combination with 1-jump ahead and the 3 Grandma Talas and the 4 Flavor Shams. This list is only playing 2 of the Rush Queens, which in my previous talks of this deck, I would cut that card completely, but there is quite a bit of an uptick in green decks and pretty fast strategies the deck's playing, like Flynn Rider and the Merfolks, the early Questers for 2. So it's just kind of a concession of those matchups, but you don't really need the full 4 with this list with the amount of ramp that this version has. You can go like turn 2, 1-jump ahead, turn 3, How Far I'll Go, and then combine with like a Fishbone Quill. You can get to like a turn 4 or turn 5. Be Prepared pretty consistently, pretty easily. And this list is also playing 3 Scars, which in a lot of times, especially against the aggressive decks, can just act as a Be Prepared, especially on like as early as turn 4 or turn 5 when your opponent's not really playing around it. They're not expecting it. And the Scar also gets around like the discard Ursula, the 2 cost that grabs a song out of your hand. And then one of my favorite plays with Scar in this deck is to play it out early, rush and challenge a couple guys, but then just leave it ready to maybe not finish off the 3rd guy. Let your opponent kind of rebuild back onto the board, and then next turn Scar can just sing Be Prepared for free, and then you just drop a Tamatoa on an empty board. And it's a very, very devastating line of play for your opponent to have to deal with. But this version, to me, feels very streamlined, very consistent with the amount of card selection and card choice you get with How Far I'll Go, the Grandma Talas, and the Develop Your Brains. So you can always kind of like find what you're looking for in any scenario or any situation you need to get out of. Now, the lists have been slowly moving away from Maui's Fishhook is a little clunkier in my opinion than the shields, and the shields are just gross. I mean, they're another 1-drop item that Flavor Sham can eat away to draw 2 cards if needed, but just being able to ready a Maui or a big quester like Bell in the late game, or obviously protecting your Tamatoa is just super powerful. So that's the list. Its game plan, game 1s in the dark are pretty much just exactly the same. You're looking for a particular setup. There's different combinations that you can go for. You don't have to have the exact same setup every game. Fishbone in your opening hand is obviously great. Popsicle in your opening hand, obviously great. But you don't have to have Fishbone in your opener anymore. You can have combinations of like turn 2, 1-jump ahead, turn 3, play any of your 4 drops, and then turn 4, your 4 drop sings How Far I'll Go to ramp again and get another card selection, and then you can play a 5-drop on that same turn and start getting your 6 and 7 drops into play super early. You could rush out a dime, get to a Scar, Be Prepared really quickly if you need to. So yeah, I've really been happy with how this deck's been performing. So we'll take a look at some of the opening hands. Okay, so let's just take a look at opening hands. Say it's game 1, we don't know what our opponent's playing, so we'll draw 7 cards and just see what we're working with here. So there's not necessarily a bunch of hard and fast rules of the exact cards that you're looking for in your opening hand, but there is a strategy that you're looking for. You're trying to set up your hand to where you don't run out of cards super early, you get to ramp, you don't have to double ramp every turn, but you want to get to 7 ink as quickly as possible. So with this being our opening hand, we have a Fishbone Quill. We're definitely not going to ink that. And then rule of thumb with like the non-inkables, I'm basically every time going to mulligan all of the non-inkables unless I have a plan to play them super early. So for example, like one jump ahead, if we have 2 in our opener, I'm going to mulligan one of them, but I'm always going to keep one of them. And then like how far I'll go, depending, like if I have a Fishbone Quill on turn 3, I may not need it for the turn 4, but if you have like a 1 jump ahead in your hand, and then a 4 drop, and then how far I'll go, and then depending on your like inkable to non-inkable ratio, I'm probably going to keep 1 how far I'll go, right? Because we're going to 1 jump on 2, we're going to play a 4 drop on 3, and then turn 4, then we're going to be able to sing how far I'll go, ramp again and filter another card and just kind of be off to the races there. So kind of a rule of thumb with Belle, I almost never just like jam her on 4 to get her double ink ability. Now, never say never, right? I wouldn't make that as just 100% rule. I'm never going to do it, but I just haven't really yet for the most part. Belle is just a late game finisher. So like I'm not really using her to get to 10 ink. And in fact, once I get to like 7 or 8, I may not ink every turn unless I just have you know, a plethora of extra cards to ink in my hand, but I don't want to be inking all of my like, you know, big money game ending cards just to get to 9 or 10 for Belle. So Belle is just kind of a game ender to look for later once you have Lucky Dime, once you've already easily gotten to 10 ink, and you can just get that fast 5 lore out of her to help close the game. So I'm definitely not going to keep her in my opening hand. We're not going to keep this Scar. So we're going to keep the Fishbone Quill. We'll definitely keep the Flavor Sham. We wish we had a Popsicle, but we don't. Maui I am going to keep because that's going to kind of be my game plan is like with this hand, if I don't have anything to do on 1 or 2, I know I'm going to Fishbone on 3, do that extra ink for 4, and then turn 4, we'll be able to play Maui to get on the board and start clearing up some of our opponent's characters, and then maybe Flavor Sham after that, but depending. So I'm definitely keeping these 3, and so these 2 are definitely easily going for the mulligan, and then you just take into consideration these 2, right? You could just keep both of these, right? Because now I have a 1-drop item to play. Flavor Sham would be able to eat it when he comes down. We know we're going to have that extra card draw. So you could just keep this. I would, since I already have the Flavor Sham. And then the Develop Your Brain, it's a safe inkable, right? And so just shipping these 2 is perfectly fine because I have my ramp plan, I have my card draw, I have my removal. It's a very smooth game plan. There's, you know, if you really wanted to, there's an argument for throwing this back, but what if I get like a Scar with this or just some crazy expensive non-inkable that I really don't want? And this card isn't super important. It's really just good in the mid to late game when I'm digging for something or looking for a particular card, but it's very easily inkable now. So I would just keep this. This is a very safe keep for this deck. I would ship these 2 back, so let's just do that and see what 2 that we end up with. And I mean, again, since we have the Fishbone Quill, you know, a big non-inkable is not the end of the world, but we want our opener to be smooth, our game plan very flexible. We can, you know, if we're playing against an aggro deck and we need to shift into ramp to 7 and find Be Prepared to Scar as quickly as possible, then cool. If we're playing against a mirror, then we want to just establish Flavor Sham and Fishbone to draw as many cards as possible and look for Tamato and Lucky Dimes, like the most important things to do there. So let's see what other 2 cards that we end up with, and we'll just kind of go through a couple turns here. So we end up with a Maleficent Dragon and another Maui, perfectly fine. So now I'm not going to ink the Develop Your Brain. So turn 1, we will ink Dragons, perfectly fine. We're nowhere near 9 ink. You don't need to hold on to this. This is a card you draw into mid to late game and plan around it then, but easy ink for now. And then here, I would just go for the Develop Your Brain. We either find an easy card that we can just ink next turn, or you do find a turn 2 1 jump ahead, which would be really, really good for our hand. So we'll do that. We'll look at our options. We have Grandma Tala, Inkable, 4-drop, and Madame Medusa, 6. Here, I would just take the Grandma Tala. We have a couple Mauis for removal. Madame Medusa is really good. I would consider keeping this if you are against a steel deck and they're playing like Beast and Robin Hood, then possibly you plan your mid game around this card, and then you could just start inking like, you know, some of the stuff. You don't need 2 Mauis if you're going to hold on to this. So let's say we're not playing steel. If we were playing steel, I would heavily consider keeping this. Against everything else, I'm probably just going to take the Inkable since we're still establishing our early game. And that would be our turn 1, and then turn 2, take a look. Rush Queen. So this is going to be situational, right? If you're playing against the green deck, they had, a Cursed Merfolk, then sure, we can jam this, but we're probably not, if we're not, then, this is a very easily inkable card. Don't just play this, this card selection in this deck, you don't always have all the card draw in the world. So if you don't have Flavor Sham, then you really have to be careful of what you're playing and what you're inking, because while you're ramping really quickly, this deck can run out of cards very easily. So we'll just pretend we're not playing against the green deck or something with it. We don't have to have this right now. That's an easily inkable card. And if that is the case, I would go ahead and put this Shield of Virtue into play, because we know next turn is going to be Fishbone Quill. We'll probably double link for that turn, and then for turn 4, it would leave us the option of either being able to Maui to start clearing up our opponent's characters, or we'll play the Flavor Sham and immediately banish the shield to get back later with like a crab, but we'll get to draw 2 cards and that sort of thing. Also, Grand Matala, I mean, you ever have the choice between the two, if you have items, Flavor Sham 100% is way more powerful than Grandma. But so, ink her if you have to make a decision between the two. But obviously, if you don't have any items, jam her and look for one, So we're going to turn 3. We draw for the turn. We find another shield. We're not going to need that because, we know we're going to play Fishbone Quill this turn, so you can easily ink that card. We're going to play that. And then Flavor Sham, first would eat the shield when he comes down. And then after Fishbones, double ink for a couple times. You get to 7 ink. Don't be afraid to Flavor Sham and eat your Fishbone Quill, and that's perfectly fine. You'd rather get the cards than just leaving the item and play. And once you get to the end game and find your Tamatoa, you're going to start getting it back from your discard anyway. So play the Fishbone Quill. Now, you can make a decision here. Remember with Fishbone Quill, you can double ink any turn you want, right? So I could just go ahead, and if I was going to do it this turn, I would activate Fishbone Quill and put one of the extra Mauis away. But what am I doing next turn? I don't have a 6-drop. So do I really need to double link this turn and double link next turn? If I had a 6-drop that I wanted to play, then yeah, that's how you keep your options open. But if my plan is going to be, worst case scenario, I have to play a Maui to start catching back up, you can double link next turn. I would get another card's worth of information to decide what I want to ink. I might draw something to where it's like, okay, that changes my game plan completely. I'll ink that, Fishbone, ink something else, maybe the Grand Matala. You have another card's worth of information for your opponent. So just keep your options open. We'll say we're not playing a 6-drop next turn. I know I can get to 5 ink now. This is where it kind of gets complicated, right? If I'm playing against a steel deck, I mean, they could have Benja, right? And they blow up this Fishbone. So, keep that in mind. If you're playing against, a deck that's playing a bunch of Benjas or a way to interact with your items, and you really think you're going to need to play a Maui next turn, then go ahead and activate it. So there's a lot of ifs and what ifs in Lorcana. It's what makes this game great. But just for the hypothetical, we're going to say that we're going to have the luxury of waiting another turn to see what our opponent does, and then see also what we draw. And then we drew another Fishbone Quill. We know that is a card we definitely don't need. We don't need an extra one of those. That's an easily inkable card. We'll say, yes, we need to get on board. We need to start doing stuff. So we're going to activate the Fishbone Quill, put 1 Maui away, and we'll play 1 Maui, get in there. Probably going to be a 2-for-1. It's going to take out 1 character, opponent challenges back, whatever. Then we'll do 1 more turn. Let's take a look. So we found a Madame Medusa, and this would all be situational. Do you need more board interaction right now? If that's the case, I would 100% do the Grand Matala over the Flavor Sham, and then the following turn, Flavor Sham can banish a shield and draw some extra cards. If the Maui was enough to catch you up on board, awesome. Play the Flavor Sham, banish the shield. We get to draw 2 more cards. So yeah, that's how I want you to think with this deck and make decisions with this deck. It's all situational. Do I need to banish more of my opponent's characters? Do I have the luxury of taking a turn off and just ramping and drawing more cards? Awesome. So that's the game plan, kind of in the dark. The game plan is the same every game. You're trying to ramp, you're trying to draw cards, you're trying to get to your late game. It's just, how do I do that? What combination? You don't have to prioritize how far I'll go, but if your opening hand is 1 jump ahead, 4-drop, and that, keep those 3, and then keep a number of easy, safe inkable cards to make sure you're going to be able to do that. Because especially if your 4-drop is Grand Matala, this is one of my favorite openings with the deck, especially a non-Flavor Sham opening, is turn 2, 1 jump ahead, turn 3, Grand Matala. She replaces herself, so you get to look at the top 2, put 1 in your hand, and then on turn 4, she gets to sing how far I'll go. You'll ramp again, you'll look at the top 2 again, and so you're doing game actions without actually losing any card advantage, because both of those cards just immediately replace themselves, and then how far I'll go ramps you too, so you're going to get to those 6 and 7 drops a lot faster. So That's in the dark. And then for game one, we'll take a look. Really, the game plan doesn't really change much match to match, but let's take a look at some different card combinations, and we'll go into a few matchup specifics. Okay, so unlike our last video where we talked about the Emerald Amethyst Tempo deck, that deck kind of has a very different game plan against a lot of different decks in the format, right? Sometimes it's the mid-range deck, sometimes it's the aggro deck, sometimes it's a control deck, and the breakdown is very specific match to match of what cards you're looking for, what your strategy is, and your ways to win the game. With Ruby Sapphire Items, your game plan against every deck in the format is exactly the same. How you get there might vary game to game slightly, but you have a lot of cards that basically do the same thing and get you there the same way. And, obviously against aggressive decks, you're going to need to get, pump the brakes a little faster than normal. And then against like the mirror match, you're not really going to have to prioritize like Be Prepared and Scar and stuff like that as much as you do against like some of the, mid-range decks or the aggro decks. So we're just going to kind of highlight some different card combinations and different things for different matchups, but there's not really this is your mulligan, playing against this matchup, this is your mulligan playing versus like Steel Song, blah, blah, blah. I'll just kind of talk in like generalities, because this deck is it's very straightforward, it's very consistent, and the game plan is always the same. The game plan is draw a bunch of cards, ramp as much as possible, don't run out of cards, don't let yourself just run out of cards completely, especially against these discard decks, and then make your opponent not win the game by either using Scar, Be Prepared, Maui, Madame Medusa, whatever you need, and then get to Lucky Dime, Tamatoa, Bell to close out in the end the game. Now, one big difference in this list that I notice is it's not running the Gaston. The 6-drop comes into play, you look at the top 3, put one back in your hands, the rest on the bottom, and then he quests for 3, but he is 6-drop that's non-inkable, and it's a really good Lucky Dime target, but I think I understand why it's not in the deck, and it basically got replaced by How Far I'll Go, which I like, because that gives us a bigger advantage against the aggressive decks, which were in the past, they are still our worst matchup, but I think that matchup is quite a bit easier now, because now you have ways to streamline and get to Scar and Be Prepared a lot quicker and more consistently, so you don't just get run over and you don't end up having to like discard your whole hand to Flynn's and Merfolks and that sort of thing. So let's talk about, these are some of kind of the key cards. Obviously, Be Prepared is not like crazy tech card, right? But I just kind of wanted to highlight it with Scar together. These cards against like aggressive decks and mid-range decks are a lot of the times the same card. And if you can clear their board just as well with Scar as you could Be Prepared, Scar is almost going to always be the better choice, especially if you have characters already in play that aren't going to get banished if you get to clear their side with Scar instead of Be Prepared. And kind of like I mentioned in the beginning, if there's a lot of times a scenario come up where your opponent has 3 or 4 exerted characters, and Scar could just take all of them out with, but then he would also get banished from that. But if you have the option, and depending on what the lore count is, obviously, don't let your opponent just win the game out of nowhere. But if you could take out 2 or 3 with the Scar and let him stay on the board, especially if you already have a Be Prepared in play, he gets to end up readied. He'll have some damage on him. But if you think your opponent will play 2 or 3 more characters back into the board to catch back up, and then you can sing Be Prepared with Scar next turn, and then just slam like Tamato or what have you on the M2 board and just kind of get a free turn. You don't forget about that interaction. But a lot of the times, Scar and Be Prepared are the same card in a lot of situations against some of these decks. And then against discard decks, decks that are playing 2-drops Ursula, almost basically never. Don't keep Be Prepared in your opening hand. And you're most of the time not going to keep Scar either, but you don't want Be Prepared to get ripped out of your hand by the 2-drop Ursula. You want to ramp, draw cards, filter, and just find it at the moment that you need. But just remember that Scar, a lot of times, is going to be the same card, but it can't be hit by that Ursula. So one thing with one jump ahead against those decks as well, if I'm on the play, right, I know I'm going to get to play one jump ahead on turn 2 before their turn 2 Ursula. On the draw, I'm going to try to find the Fishbone Quill hands, and definitely don't keep How Far I'll Go against those decks either. So if you can, don't keep any songs in your opener against the 2-drop Ursula decks. Just don't give them that, because it's kind of a win whenever they play it on 2 or 3. You don't have a song, and all they did was play a 1/3 that quests for 1 that you really don't care about, instead of playing something like, Singer Ursula or something that quests for 2 that's a lot more scary. So them not getting to rip that free card out of your hand is a big deal whenever they decide to play that Ursula. So That's the highlight of these. Queen of Hearts, still just a 2-drop. Now, against the aggro decks, don't aggressively mulligan for this card because we're only playing 2. It's just kind of a, oh sweet, I did draw to my opener game 2 or 3 against aggro. Cool, I have something to do, but I wouldn't like mulligan my entire hand for these. You can just, our main game plan against those decks is look for a nice aggressive ramp curve into a Scar or Be Prepared or Madame Medusa Mai, what have you. So that's the game plan for that. I do still like a couple of these, and they can also combo with another character or two to take out a location. So don't forget about Queen's Castle and that sort of thing. Keep those in mind when you're playing against those Amethyst decks. And some people still play the McDuck Manor out of the Sapphire decks as well. So Madame Medusa. Most important card against these Steel Song decks. It comes into play and banishes basically anything that they have, except for the Giant Tinkerbell, which I am a fan of these Steel Song decks that are going back to Lantern and bigger plays like Giant Tinkerbell and Surfer Stitch, but not everybody is back to that yet. But if you're looking at Steel Song, look into some of those lists. I'm a big fan. I may do a video next week on that list as well. But Madame Medusa, most important card against the Steel Song decks, hitting those Sad Beasts and those Robin Hoods. It's just it's such a huge tempo swing, especially when you get to play this on like, turn 4 or 5. So, they definitely don't have time to play around this card, and it takes out some of their biggest threats. Lucky Dime, not a surprise. This is in all the Sapphire decks. It is probably the single-handedly most important card against these Ruby Amethyst decks. They just have no interaction with it. Your game plan, especially on the play, is just get to this as quickly as possible. Play this on a turn that is safe, that they're not, they're not going to have an answer for it, but get this down and then just start activating as much as possible and run away with the game. And then we kind of mentioned Belle earlier. Don't forget, she does have a double link ability when she's in play, but don't prioritize that. If that's your only game plan and you really need it, fine. Utilize it. Don't forget it, but don't make that your main game plan. Bella's really just kind of a late game card. I'm talking, you're already at 9 or 10 ink. You're drawing all these cards every turn. You pretty much have control of the game. You're just trying to close it out as quickly as possible. Your best Lucky Dime targets in the late game are Tamatoa and Belle. So use her for that. And then you can also combine her with like Shield to quest with 5 and then Readier and the like. So that's, this is kind of just part of your in-game package, obviously with Tamatoa. And then the last card I'll mention is the one of Judy Hopps. I would not play more of this card. You could even consider cutting it if you want. Don't ever target a Fishbone Quill or a Popsicle with this, obviously. Don't target a Fishbone Quill with it. It's just not worth it. Giving your opponent that extra card, especially if they already got the activation out of Fishbone Quill. You can hit a Lucky Dime with it, but Tamatoa obviously can just get it back, but that will be a little bit of a tempo swing. So there's that. Against the Steel Song decks, hit any and every item that you possibly see. You're fine with hitting a Lantern. You're fine with hitting a Flute, especially. They draw cards with a whole new world anyway. You don't really care in that matchup about giving them one extra card. And that's where this card really, really shines. And then also, it can blow up one of your own Popsicles to draw you an extra card. So, and it's a 2/3 body the quest for 2. So great stats for the cost. It's inkable. Most of the time it's ink. Really shines against Steel Song. Can take out a Lucky Dime. Don't target Fishbone Quill with it. So these are just kind of not the crazy tech cards. A lot of these cards show up in a lot of the lists. These are the ones I wanted to kind of just go over, maybe be some misunderstandings with how you're supposed to utilize some of these. So that's the game plan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this deck. If I was going to Atlanta, I would be testing this deck very, very heavily. It's very consistent. It's very powerful. It does pretty much the most powerful things that are happening in the game. So yeah, I've been really having a good time with this deck. Alright, Explorers, thanks for watching. I hope you've been having just as much fun and a blast playing this game as I have over the last couple of weeks, especially with the store champs and the set champs for Into the Inklings. Really excited for the new set. Ursula's Return coming out in a couple of weeks as well. And the following week after that is the first ever challenge in Atlanta. I am sadly not going to be in attendance, but there are several competitors from the Dallas-Fort Worth area that I am teaming up with. I'm going to help them play test, prepare, and I may do some content on that. I think it'll be really exciting to show kind of preparation and results from the very first challenge coming up for Lorcana. If there's any other videos you'd like me to do a deep dive or a tech on, let me know in the comments. If you enjoy watching these videos, please, it really helps us out. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.